Have you ever noticed that some men, even without being the most handsome, the richest, or the most talkative, achieve something that seems almost unfair? They don't chase after women. They don't beg for attention. They don't spend nights trying to decipher messages. And yet, it's precisely these men who end up being pursued, remembered, and even idealized by women who swore they would never fall for that type. What most don't know, and almost no one admits, is that there's a forbidden strategy behind it, so old that Machiavelli already described it between the lines when talking about power, influence, and human nature. A silent, almost invisible strategy that doesn't require beauty, money, or ready-made phrases. It only requires understanding how people really work, not how they say they work. And this might shock you, but I'll say it anyway. Women don't chase after those who love them. They chase after those who don't need them. This is the part no one told you, because it shatters all the comfortable romanticism you were raised in. Since childhood, you've been taught that effort brings reward, that being kind brings reciprocity, that the more you give, the more love you receive in return. But the real world doesn't operate by those rules. Their attention follows a different logic, a logic based on respect, unpredictability, presence, and absence. A logic you never learned until now. And here's the quick promise: when you understand this mechanism, your behavior changes. And when your behavior changes, their reaction changes too. Not because you'll manipulate someone, but because you'll finally stop acting like a predictable man. Today, I'm going to show you, step by step, the psychological structure that transforms any ordinary man into someone impossible to ignore. You'll understand why certain men leave a mark, while others disappear without a trace. And when you connect all these dots, you'll realize that the power has never been in the words. It's always been in the posture. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now, not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He realizes sooner or later that Machiavelli wasn't talking about violence when he said it's better to be feared than loved, but about something much more subtle: respect. In a politics guided by reality, not ideals, unquestioning love becomes habit, and habit becomes forgetfulness. The man who gives himself entirely without measuring the terrain becomes predictable, and predictability, for real human nature, is synonymous with weakness. He understands that the end justifies the means, when the means is simply establishing silent boundaries, those that don't need to be shouted, only perceived. It's curious how, when he stops trying to please, people begin to adjust their own behavior. It's the calculated use of emotional force, not the force that hurts, but the force that delimits territory. Thus, he learns that avoiding being hated doesn't mean pleasing everyone, but maintaining firmness without aggression. And the more he becomes a man with standards that are not for sale, the more his presence acquires a kind of inherent gravity. It's not about intimidation. It's about conveying that his life doesn't depend on anyone's approval. The curious thing is how silence, when used with virtù and fortuna, becomes one of the most elegant weapons a man can wield. He discovers that women don't pursue those who love them too much. They pursue those who don't need them to exist, those who make decisions based on real human nature and not on the romantic fantasies the world sells. And this has nothing to do with extreme coldness, but with self-control. Strategic absence teaches more than emotional outbursts because it reveals that he is capable of withdrawing when something violates his principles. For many men, this seems counterintuitive, but it's enough to observe. What is offered without resistance quickly loses value. It's like a rare book that no one finds easily. Whoever finds it takes care of it. And when he practices this constant adaptability, the dynamic changes effortlessly. He doesn't become a tyrant, he becomes a man who knows where the other person's world ends and where his begins. Thus, the fear Machiavelli refers to is not terror, but the perception that he is a man with solid boundaries. And it is at this point that the game changes completely. Respect comes before love, because respect sustains love when the initial enchantment fades. He realizes this by observing relationships around him. Whenever a man abandons his standards, the attraction collapses along with them. A simple example: when he says no to something that compromises his values, even if it bothers him at first, it ends up awakening a silent admiration. It's like in the financial market, when someone maintains their investment thesis despite external pressure. Consistency generates trust. And here, the Machiavellian principle becomes clear. Having one's own loyal armies means building an internal sense of worth that doesn't depend on external approval. When he acts like this, the woman perceives the difference between a man who loves and a man who negates himself. And between the lines, she understands that he will not be molded by fleeting emotions. This opens space for something deeper: the mastery of image, where perception begins to create reality. He realizes over time that Machiavelli was right when he said that it's not necessary to be good, but to appear good, because the world reacts first to appearances, only then to truth. In a politics guided by reality, not ideals, he understands that his image is his first own and loyal army, and that ignoring it is letting others define who he is. It's curious how female attraction always begins with perception, what she imagines about him even before meeting him. The end justifies the means when the means is taking care of one's own presence, posture, and silence. Most men over-explain themselves as if they needed to justify every choice, but this only weakens their position. A short phrase, a firm posture, and the appearance of virtue effortlessly takes command. When he controls how he is seen, he controls the narrative. And ironically, when he stops trying to appear perfect and simply behaves calmly, he becomes more magnetic. Constant adaptability doesn't mean changing masks, but adjusting his energy to the environment with Machiavellian intelligence. The best way to understand this is to observe men who enter a room and, even without opening their mouths, capture attention. They are not necessarily the most handsome or best dressed. They are those who master the calculated use of force, that silent force that dictates rhythm and distance. He learns that showing 80% of who he is enough, and that the 20% that remains hidden creates the mystery that differentiates ordinary men from men impossible to ignore. Women pursue what they don't fully understand, and that's where true human nature reveals itself. The unknown is more attractive than what is too readily available. Therefore, he avoids the impulse to explain himself, because explaining is trying to convince, and convincing is the function of those who are insecure. He prefers to shape his image through small actions, direct eye contact, concise sentences, firm decisions. And when someone tries to test his posture, he allows silence to work for him. Silence is a sword that doesn't cut, but separates. The appearance of virtue is not falsehood, it's strategy. He doesn't lie about who he is, but chooses what he reveals, just as great leaders carefully choose where to position their troops. This doesn't mean hiding flaws, but understanding that total exposure kills the mystery and dilutes presence. In a world where everyone shouts, the man who observes before speaking naturally becomes more interesting. He understands that constant adaptability doesn't mean camouflaging himself, but presenting himself in a way that aligns with the impact he wants to make. Gradually, he realizes that his image creates an atmosphere that precedes his physical presence. And it is in this atmosphere that desire is born. When a woman can't fully capture him, she thinks about him more than she'd like. And it is precisely in this mental space, created by the combination of silence and magnetism, that the perfect ground emerges for the next Machiavellian strategy, to be, at the same time, the lion and the fox. He realizes sooner or later that every woman tests him, not out of malice, but because true human nature always seeks to understand where the structure gives way. Machiavelli already said that to survive in politics guided by reality, not ideals, a man needs to combine the strength of the lion with the cunning of the fox. The lion represents a firm presence, a calculated use of emotional force, silent limits that don't need speeches. The fox is the attentive gaze, the strategic reading, the silence that observes before reacting. If he's only a lion, he becomes explosive, predictable, easy to manipulate. If he's only a fox, he becomes charm without a backbone, someone who enchants but doesn't sustain. When a woman tests him, whether with irony, jealousy, or an uncomfortable comment, she wants to feel if there is a man or a boy before her. He understands that bending too much undermines his authority. Hardening without purpose creates resentment. Balance is the true virtue that Machiavelli mentions in his writings. And it is in this balance that he learns the art of making decisions based on real human nature. When she is emotional, he becomes the fox. He observes her body language, her tone of voice, what she says and what she avoids saying. He knows that the end justifies the means when the means is to remain calm and understand the situation before acting. Reacting to the bait is falling into her emotional game. Observing is mastering the board. He notices, for example, that instead of arguing at the wrong time, it is enough to say, "I understand your point. Let's talk about this later." This dismantles the chaos without raising his voice. And contrary to what many think, this self-control is not coldness, it is constant adaptability. It's curious how, by doing this, she respects him more because she perceives that there is a man there capable of remaining centered while the world around him becomes disorganized. The fox sees paths, the lion defends them. But when she crosses boundaries, and every relationship inevitably tests boundaries, it's the lion who needs to appear. Not the roaring lion, but the lion who asserts himself through simple posture. He says no when necessary, without raising his voice. He steps aside when standards are violated, without making a dramatic speech. He demonstrates through his actions that his principles are not for sale. And it is precisely here that his power grows. Women pursue the man who maintains consistency, not the one who yields out of fear of losing. By acting this way, he deeply understands the Machiavellian teaching. Avoiding being hated is not being passive. It's knowing how to apply correction at once and benefits little by little. When he masters the lion-fox duality, his presence becomes unpredictable and stable at the same time, a magnetic combination. And it is this magnetism that prepares the ground for the next step, entering not her heart, but her mind. He learns that in the Machiavellian practice applied to female psychology, divide and conquer is not manipulation, but a strategy based on real human nature. And the first uncomfortable truth is this: directly arguing with her beliefs only reinforces what she already thinks. Therefore, he adopts a policy guided by reality, not by romantic ideals. Instead of confronting, he sows doubt. Something simple, like responding, "Interesting that you think that," when she makes an impulsive statement, is powerful. This phrase shifts the focus of the conversation and makes her mind work against itself. He doesn't try to win debates. He creates internal tension. The appearance of virtue lies in respecting her opinion, while true virtue lies in guiding her to question her own standards. This is how he avoids being hated, because he doesn't attack, he only opens mental space for reflection. The fox observes and plants seeds. The lion remains firm so as not to be swept away by emotionalism. Silence here is his greatest ally. Instead of reacting to any provocation, he lets the psychological echo do its work. It's like throwing a small stone into a lake. The water seems calm, but the ripples keep spreading. When he responds less than she expects, her mind tries to fill in the gaps. This works because most internal conflicts arise precisely from empty spaces. And when she tries to gauge his position, he maintains a calculated use of emotional force. He doesn't retaliate. He doesn't justify himself. He just leaves something hanging in the air that makes her think. Machiavelli already taught, whoever controls perception controls the scene. And by creating this small internal division, he doesn't become a threat. He becomes a mystery. Constant adaptability means knowing when to speak, and especially when not to speak. And the more she tries to understand his logic, the more involved she becomes in the process. After all, women pursue what they can't fully decipher. A simple example: when she says, "All men are the same," the average man defensively retorts. The Machiavellian strategist simply replies, "Curious you think so." This phrase doesn't confront or attack, but it divides her inner world in two: what she believes and the possibility of being wrong. And whenever this opening appears, he enters as a different presence, someone who escapes labels. This creates tension, and tension is much more attractive than immediate certainty. He doesn't compete with her emotional universe. He rearranges the axis of that universe. And the more he acts this way, the more she sees him as someone who is above the chaos, not within it. It's virtue applied to the relationship, entering her mind as a mystery, not as noise. And it is within this carefully opened psychological space that the next strategy fits perfectly, rewarding in doses and correcting all at once. He finally understands one of Machiavelli's deepest principles: wounds should be inflicted at once, while benefits should be given gradually. This has nothing to do with cruelty, but rather with politics guided by reality, not ideals. When boundaries are crossed, he doesn't raise his voice, doesn't create drama, doesn't make long speeches. He uses the calculated use of emotional force, silence, distance, and withdrawal. Every action is measured, firm, clean. And it is precisely this strategic absence that acts as a mirror. It sees on its own the impact of its own behavior. Instead of endless corrections, he applies a single clear response, which establishes virtù and fortuna in his favor. Avoiding being hated here means correcting directly, without humiliating, and then moving on. Consistency is the loyal army he builds around his identity, and the more he maintains his standards, the more it respects him, even if at the moment it tries to deny it. While rewards follow the opposite logic. They are small, rare, and unpredictable. He understands that true human nature responds more strongly to mystery than to abundance. When everything is predictable, value is lost. When uncertainty exists, desire is created. He understands that the end justifies the means when the means is to consciously calibrate doses of attention, affection, and presence. It's not about manipulation, it's about teaching, through practice, that access to his energy is not for sale. A simple example: instead of praising all the time, he praises when something truly touches him. Instead of always being available, he shows up when it makes sense. This activates her reward system in the same way a casino activates the expectation of the next win. Not because he treats her badly, but because he doesn't give everything at once. Constant adaptability is knowing when to advance and when to retreat, creating an emotional rhythm that keeps the relationship alive, intense, and balanced. This strategy works because the brain registers quick pain with intensity and slow pleasure with continuous desire. He becomes not only her man, but the emotional system to which she reacts. When he establishes solid standards and rewards in careful doses, she begins to see him as a reference point, not an accessory. It's the epitome of virtuous appearance. He doesn't seem controlling. He seems centered, stable, and secure, and the more she perceives this, the more magnetic his presence becomes. But this magnetism doesn't stem solely from rewards. It also stems from the right words spoken at the right time. He understands that sometimes a single phrase, precise as an arrow, can do more than hours of conversation. And it is precisely at this point that the next step emerges, to observe deeply and to release the truth with surgical precision. He discovers that true strength lies not in speaking much, but in observing before any words are spoken. Machiavelli already showed that decisions based on real human nature require reading, not impulsiveness. Therefore, he pays attention to micro-expressions, a shift in gaze, a change in tone of voice, a posture that shrinks or expands. This is politics guided by reality, not by ideals. He doesn't react to what she says, he reacts to what she reveals without realizing it. The calculated use of force begins here, in the silent observation that dismantles masks. And when he finally speaks, he doesn't waste ammunition. He chooses a short, clean, and surgical phrase. Something like, "You laugh, but you don't seem happy." This phrase, spoken calmly without judgment, penetrates deeper than any sermon. He understands that avoiding being hated means speaking truths like someone handing over a mirror, not like someone throwing a stone. And the more he observes, the more she feels read, sometimes for the first time. This kind of precision works because it touches the place where she believed it was hidden. He doesn't accuse, he only describes what he sees, and this has an impact because nobody usually notices such subtle details. When he says, "You speak differently when he's around," for example, he doesn't create conflict, he reveals a pattern. The virtue appears precisely in the calmness with which he delivers this truth, without altering his tone, without trying to convince, simply putting reality on the table. This creates psychological tension, but a healthy tension. She realizes that he sees layers that others ignore. The appearance of virtue arises when he speaks little, but speaks correctly. And the end justifies the means because the phrase precisely organizes her emotional chaos in a way that long conversations cannot. It's almost like adjusting her internal compass. Constant adaptability is knowing when to be silent and when to point out the obvious that nobody dares to say. Over time, he realizes that these small truths shape her perception of who he is. He becomes the man who doesn't judge, but sees, who doesn't control, but reveals, who doesn't impose, but illuminates. And this presence creates a kind of respect that goes beyond superficial admiration. He becomes rare, and the rare is always desired. This is only possible because he develops his own loyal armies within himself. Self-control, silent reading, unhurried analysis. These are the qualities that make his words penetrate so deeply. But there is an even greater power than precise speech: strategic absence. It is absence that creates mental space, that forces reflection, that makes the person revisit every detail of what was said. And it is precisely this next movement that transforms an ordinary man into a true gravitational force. He discovers that excessive availability turns even the best man into a decorative piece. Machiavelli already taught that, in politics guided by reality, not ideals, predictability is weakness. When he is always accessible, always ready, always saying yes, his presence loses impact. The end justifies the means when the means are simple, disappearing a little, not with drama, not with dirty tricks, but with maturity. It is the calculated use of emotional force, the force that doesn't need to push, only retreat. And in this retreat, something powerful happens. It begins to fill the silence with thoughts, hypotheses, memories. The human mind detests vacuums, and absence becomes fertile ground for projection. Avoiding being hated here means disappearing elegantly, without friction. He doesn't fight, doesn't accuse, doesn't create a storm. He simply remains silent. And his silence says more than any two-page speech. What's most striking is how his absence amplifies everything that came before. If his presence had value, his absence becomes studded with meaning. She revisits conversations, interprets phrases, tries to understand why he stopped being there. That's how the appearance of virtue, calmness, composure, security, gains strength in her imagination. He doesn't disappear to punish, he disappears to protect his energy. Real human nature works like this. What is guaranteed loses value. What is uncertain provokes emotion. It's the same mechanism that makes the market react more to an absence than to a constant presence. When he distances himself, she feels the impact, because deep down, she understands that he has his own loyal armies. A life that doesn't revolve around her. Constant adaptability is knowing how to identify the moment when your value is being treated as guaranteed and masterfully applying the brakes. Upon returning, he doesn't offer any justification. He simply appears naturally, as if he knows his presence is a scarce and valuable resource. This creates an emotional weight. She approaches him without realizing it, as if something within her is being pulled. He maintains a calm, firm posture, showing no need. The strategic absence applied with virtue reminds her that he is not a prize to be won. He is a force with which she relates. And when this movement is consistent, she begins to understand that there is a man there, different from those she knows. A man who doesn't despair, doesn't rush, doesn't bend. And it is precisely this type of man who becomes not only desired, but transformative. Because after the absence comes the final impact, becoming not a phase in her life, but the psychological turning point she will never forget. He realizes that simply existing as the boyfriend is insufficient. Any man can fill that role. But being the turning point in a woman's life is something few have the virtue to assume. This requires a policy guided by reality, not by romantic ideals. He understands that transformation happens when he sees not only what she shows, but what she hides, fears, insecurities, contradictions, not through control, but through profound perception. He says what others avoid, names what she feels, but has never admitted. This creates a kind of intensity that sets him apart from the common category. Freud already explained that emotional memory shapes desire. The brain doesn't cling to the predictable, but to what provokes change. When he establishes real standards and withdraws when they are violated, he stands out. Having one's own loyal armies means exactly that, knowing who one is and not negotiating with what destroys one's identity. And this is where the end justifies the means. He becomes unforgettable, not for what he promises, but for what he cuts away. He cuts away the excess, cuts away the chaos, cuts away that which prevents her from growing. This creates a presence that remains alive even in his absence. She feels that before him she thought one way, after him she can no longer return to the old pattern. This is true psychological dominance. Not the kind that oppresses, but the kind that awakens. He becomes the figure who showed her limits, silent strength, calculated use of emotional force, an appearance of virtue, and constant adaptability. A man who doesn't need to shout to be heard. He speaks little and changes much, Real human nature recognizes this kind of impact, rarity. And rarity creates attachment, creates fascination, creates a search. He doesn't present himself as a savior. He presents himself as a mirror that makes her see what needs to be changed. Being her turning point means being the chapter she can't rewrite. This happens when your actions shape her emotional environment so profoundly that even if the relationship ends, the influence remains. He's the man she remembers when she needs to make difficult decisions, the man whose firmness taught her more than any words, the man whose absence spoke louder than the presence of many others. This isn't manipulation, it's a consequence of being a man aligned with himself, guided by standards, principles, and virtue. He enters her life as change, not as a distraction. And inevitably, this leads him to the final stage. Understanding that real control lies not in dominating another person, but in dominating oneself. It is this inner mastery that sustains the silent, psychological, and emotional power that closes the entire Machiavellian structure. He finally understands that nothing he has learned so far is trickery, but psychological structures deeply aligned with real human nature. Machiavelli knew that the mind reacts more to patterns than to words, more to posture than to promises, more to politics guided by reality than to idealistic speeches. Real control happens when he builds presence, not entertainment, when he becomes a man whose energy is perceived even before he speaks. It is the calculated use of emotional force that creates this atmosphere. Firmness without rigidity, calm without apathy, intensity without dependence. The appearance of virtue arises precisely when he does not try to appear saintly, only consistent. And this consistency, sustained by his own loyal armies within him, transforms his silence into language. He understands that avoiding being hated is not about pleasing, it's about maintaining clear boundaries. And the more he becomes this man, the more life responds with respect. The truth is that the female mind, just like the male mind, follows principles of attention and reward. Whoever occupies mental space gains a strategic advantage. And he occupies this space not through insistence, but through precision. He creates silence, creates mystery, creates an inner space that she cannot ignore. This is constant adaptability applied to the relationship. He understands the game, but doesn't get lost in it. He moves with virtù and fortuna, knowing when to advance, when to retreat, and when simply to observe. Every action of his is based on decisions anchored in reality, not in emotional impulses. And that is precisely why his impact is so profound. She doesn't follow him because he forces her. She follows because he pulls her. Gravity doesn't pursue, gravity attracts. And when he integrates this, he realizes that true psychological power is as silent as it is inevitable. This mastery isn't about controlling people, but about controlling one's own emotional axis. True control is born from the man who knows himself, who upholds his standards, who doesn't dissolve to fit anyone's expectations. He understands that by pressing internal switches, attention, absence, tension, reward, he transforms logic into obsession. But this transformation only happens because he has become solid, and a solid man is rare. A solid man creates a permanent presence. A solid man marks chapters. He doesn't go unnoticed like a footnote. Now, with all this internalized, he is ready to truly apply the forbidden strategy that Machiavelli hinted at centuries ago, mastering his own behavior to influence the entire surrounding environment. And it is precisely here that the final reflection of the video prepares to emerge, leading the viewer to the moment of choice. Now that you've made it this far, there's a question only you can answer. Will you continue living as someone predictable? Or will you apply all of this and finally take control of your own story? Because the truth is simple, nothing changes until you change. It's no use understanding Machiavelli, female psychology, strategic absence, magnetic presence, if tomorrow you wake up and revert to the same behaviors that have made you invisible until now. The world respects those who respect themselves. And respect doesn't come from speeches, it comes from attitude. Look honestly at your life right now. How many times have you kept quiet to please others? How many times have you sacrificed yourself to avoid losing someone? How many times have you become too accessible out of fear of being alone? And how many of those choices actually brought you what you wanted? If you felt this video open something up inside you, then you already know the next step. Apply it, test it, observe it, adjust it. The power isn't in knowledge, it's in using that knowledge. And if you want to continue evolving, continue understanding the human mind, continue developing presence, quiet strength, strategy, and emotional intelligence, you need to be here for the next videos. So tell me one word in the comments. Control. I want to know who is truly committed to their own growth. And of course, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking with me. With each video, you'll become a rarer, more solid, and more impossible to ignore man.